Support for WMFE comes from JustCallMo.com and attorney Mo DeWitt, proud presenter of WMFE's Engage program. Mo DeWitt is committed to offering legal guidance in personal injury cases, such as car accidents and slip and falls. Offices in Orlando. More at JustCallMo.com. Welcome to Engage, leading conversations that matter. Engage is made possible with support from inaugural sponsor JustCallMo.com and the support of listeners like you.
You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Coming up, growth in the region means growth at Orlando International Airport. We'll talk with CEO Kevin Tebow about this recent crush of passengers passing through MCO. And later, an Orange County middle school is turning their gas-guzzling school buses for quiet, efficient electric buses. And Monday is Eclipse Day. We're going to talk about the celestial event with the planetarium director at Seminole State College. First, though, you know, every 6 minutes, someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's in this country. It's a progressive disease. It attacks your nervous system. It can start with just a small tremor, but symptoms worsen over time. The Parkinson Association of Central Florida has helped innovate new treatments and support systems. That organization focuses on Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and Lake counties, and estimates 20,000 people in the region are living with the disorder. We talked to two of them earlier today, John Gabriel and Todd Stewart. Stewart is the president of the Parkinson Association of Central Florida, helping plan a critical event for the group this weekend, and he was diagnosed when he was just 35 years old. John Gabriel is an advisor for the Orlando Magic. Fans probably remember him from the early years of the franchise and when he was the general manager of the team. I started the conversation by asking John Gabriel to describe the day he sat in that doctor's office and received his diagnosis.
Like probably many people, it's a time you don't forget, but you sort of turn to the future and say, maybe the next doctor will have another opinion. And you hope for that until you face the realization that you've got PD.
What was happening or changing in your life that made you go to the doctor?
I had a quiver in my ring finger, and I went to the doctor praying for a small tumor somewhere hitting a nerve. And, it was one of those things that at one point, I've run out of second, third, and fourth opinions, and you begin to start living with it. And then the next question that will come up down the road is, who do I let know, and who do I let know first?
Who did you let know?
Well, my wife's fantastic as a patient advocate. She wouldn't let me go 2 feet without her. So she knew. Then we had to break it to the kids who were teenagers at the time. One of them wasn't, he was younger. But, I think one of the moments of confession would be when I was with the New York Knicks. We were at a small basketball operations office, and I asked the president, Hall of Famer, GM, Phil Jackson, if I could let the staff know in a meeting, and along with Donnie Walsh from Indiana, they said, sure, go ahead. I said, I just don't want people wondering why I'm slowed up a little bit or why I have the shakes. And that took a lot off my shoulders, to say the least.
What have you had to adjust in just your daily routine?
Well, now I'm getting to the point, running on the amount of time that I've had it, where my balance isn't what it used to be. I promised myself as a college basketball player and as a young adult that I would stay athletic, stay running, keep moving anyway. So we have a little house on the beach near Daytona, and at low tide, I can still run about a block and a half, and then I walk about a half a block and then run again. But that's a safe place to do it. other than that, I'm looking to hold on to something. If it's late at night, I don't know about anybody else, but my medicine wears off at a certain time, and then I have to be a little bit careful.
John, you're very known in the Orlando community, especially to Magic fans. How has the response been from, the team and the community?
They've been fantastic. Leadership and ownership have taken me back 6 years ago now as an advisor, which means I have absolutely no power whatsoever. But the decision making comes a little bit easier because you're not on the front lines as they are. But they've been great, and the fans have been fantastic. Not everybody knows because I was away from Orlando at the time that I have PD, and that's fine. I think I act a lot normal than I probably do, but occasionally I'll get a door held open for me, or somebody will grab a tray or a plate of food and carry it to the table for me. Then I know.
I want to bring Todd Stewart into the conversation now. Todd, can we start? You are president of the Parkinson Association of Central Florida. Give us a sense of the prevalence of Parkinson's in this region, please.
I think estimates now say we have about 20,000 in our Central Florida community that have Parkinson's. Parkinson's is also the fastest growing neurodegenerative disease in the world. It's growing faster than Alzheimer's. So at some point, if it is there already, you know somebody in your life that has Parkinson's very close to you, probably. But it's not hidden in corners anymore. It's everywhere. You can't really avoid it.
You were 35 years old also when you were diagnosed.
I was.
I was shocked to learn that about you. I can't even imagine what your reaction was when you got that early onset diagnosis.
Yeah, that was a brutal thing there. I was training for a half marathon, extending my runs, and then late in the runs, I'd get a little weird gait stuff. I kind of run off balance a little bit. So I went to orthopedic. They gave me cortisone shots in my knee for a couple of months, and that didn't do anything. Same time, very similar to what John Gabriel just said, I had a little tremor in my pinky finger, which I thought maybe I was drinking too much coffee or something like that. I went to a neurologist on a whim. It's like they diagnosed me in like 20 seconds, which I was not prepared for. But yeah, it's such a weird thing. You don't expect to see that at 35. You just kind of want to cross that off in case that's a possibility. But yeah, it's a real thing. Michael J. Fox was much younger than me, so it's out there.
I did want to ask you about Michael J. Fox since you brought him up. I wonder if that is what many people know about Parkinson's, and if so, is there a spectrum of how people cope with the disease, or is that kind of a reflection of everyone's diagnosis, what we see from him as a public figure?
He definitely helps. He's definitely the most prominent person in our Parkinson's world. Yeah, that is all I knew at the time. I didn't know anything about Parkinson's other than Michael J. Fox. And the first thing I did was buy a book he'd written about this and try to soak some of that knowledge in. But yeah, it's wild.
John, did you have a similar experience? Was your knowledge of Parkinson's from Michael J. Fox as well?
I was actually reading a magazine on him because I'm, like many people, a big fan. And there was an article on him in the Newsday magazine. And that's when I sort of looked down at my finger and said, it can't be. It just can't be. And till then, I really hadn't come into a lot of people contact-wise that had it. Now I can't seem to get away from it. So, I probably would say that I'm not a doctor, but it's growing at proportions and spreading in proportions that really don't seem normal. And we have a responsibility in Florida, being one of the states that leads the country in Parkinson's patients per person. So the obligation for us to support the caregivers, the people with PD, and not only them, but through putting our dollars towards research, helping the next generation.
Todd, where are we in terms of treatment?
Right now, we're still, it's mostly right now, a lot of the medications are focused on the same drug, just different delivery methods. And make some of the delivery methods a little more, I guess, palatable would be the way to describe it. I know Michael J. Fox is doing some very good research there. Stem cells, I think, have some promising thoughts in this world. But right now, the treatments aren't a whole lot different than what they did, 10 or 20 years ago. So still lots of work to be done, for sure.
Can you talk to me as well about some of the things specifically that the Parkinson Association of Central Florida has been able to do with funding received?
Sure. Over 12 years, we've done a lot of things. We've provided funding for fellowships for training for doctors and nurses in this world and get them training in movement disorders. We've helped finance and recruit the first movement disorder specialist in our area over to Advent Health. Also, let's say, engage local groups and programs and providing activities and information about treatments and education around the disease. We support therapy groups, support groups from anything like Rock City Boxing, which is like a fitness class, to Pedaling for Parkinson's, which is a spin class, Arts to Spark, a bunch of different therapy groups that are just geared for people with Parkinson's. Also providing financial assistance to those who need just quality of life things. Like there's some sort of Parkinson's service you can't get to. We want to help you get to that. So,
Todd, I was reading about some research being done, and it seems like there's a health disparity within diagnosis of Parkinson's. And I was reading that African American community members are diagnosed at a later stage and less likely to be diagnosed compared to other racial and ethnic groups. Can we talk about the significance of that, maybe what's being done, and also the importance of an early diagnosis?
Yeah, diagnosis in general is tough for Parkinson's because there's not like a hard and fast test. You can just like pop something and make some blood work and you'll find out if you have Parkinson's. It's not that easy. Most of the diagnosis actually is like it's just face to face with a neurologist knows what they're looking for. And they'll rule out other stuff through tests, but you can't. There's no one single test that's going to tell you you have Parkinson's or you don't. So that's why it's tough to diagnose for anybody. So if you're not, have full access to the healthcare system, you're not seeing doctors regularly, you may go a long time without treatment or even just knowing what it is.
Where have you found support, Todd?
It's kind of like John. I let my wife and very close family and friends know right away, but I didn't let most people know for 6 years or so. So I found great support in all those people now that they all know I'm out there in the world and I am out with this diagnosis. It just... The people you think are like on the fringes of your life are bigger supporters of you than you realize. So it's just the friend and family group I had is very good, and I couldn't get through any of this without them.
We have a big event coming up this weekend, the annual Walk for Parkinson in Altamont Springs. And John, you're going to be recognizing Dr. Rita Bornstein, former president of Rollins College, who died in January, and she lived with Parkinson's for many years.
Yeah. Though we've helped seed Central Florida with support for the variety of programming that we've mentioned, we haven't lost sight of giving dollars proportionally to people that are working primarily in research, like the Michael J. Fox Fund. And Rita was an advocate to make sure that the people doing the research for a cure got their fair share, because she was passionate about it. And passionate about it at an older age too, which was that much more amazing. First female president of Rollins College, loved by many, respected by all. I think of her, I think of the Greek saying that good things happen in society when older people plant trees whose shade they'll never sit under. And that's Rita.
We're trying to raise $150,000 to put back into the Central Florida Parkinson's community. All that money stays here. So it's going right back to our folks. You don't have to register in the study, although you can at parkinsonCF.org. You just show up at Crane's Roost at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning, April 6th. Love to have you. I had 1,500 people out there last year. I think we're having even more this year. It's growing big, and it's. If you ever have any questions about this, you want to meet the doctors and neurologists on the front lines, you meet them. Lots of vendors and pharmaceutical companies and support groups and exercise groups. All those people are going to make the quality of life for your Parkinson's people better. So all in one place. It's a good event. It's Parkinson's Awareness Month, and we're there every April. So come see us.
That was former GM of the Orlando Magic, John Gabriel, and president of the Parkinson Association of Central Florida, Todd Stewart. And that annual Walk for Parkinson's is at 9 Saturday morning at Crane's Roost in Altamont Springs. Ahead here on Engage, we'll talk about the historic traveler volume passing through Orlando International with MCO CEO Kevin Tebow. And later, an Orange County school district trading in gas-guzzling buses for electric ones. I'm Sharon Stone. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. Don't forget, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about or what you're glad you heard. Send us an email at engage@cfpublic.org. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Ahead on this program, okay, Mondays do kind of stink, but they're not the end of the world.
Astronomers and astrologers were actually one and the same thing back in the ancient world. So they were predicting things that were to happen. And if they didn't get it right, there are talks about, astronomers being, executed for failing to predict that eclipse.
We'll talk about eclipse lore with Seminole State College's planetarium manager. Right now, though, the spring break season wraps up on Sunday, and this was a busy one for Orlando International Airport. It's expected that nearly 8 million travelers will have passed through MCO just between February 23rd and April 7th. That's the unofficial end of the spring break season. Along with this increased volume comes increased delays. The increased passenger loads, combined with unpredictable weather, has led to hundreds of delays on a daily basis. Just yesterday, weather caused more than 500 flight delays at Orlando International, according to FlightAware. This increase, though, also means opportunity for growth at the airport. That is how we started our discussion with Kevin Tebow, CEO of the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority, the entity that oversees operations of Orlando International and the Orlando Executive Airport.
One of the things that we're seeing clearly is we're still the strong destination. And as we continue to, have our local partners here, whether it be the theme parks or the cruise industry, which is doing very, very well over there at Port Canaveral, all of those things create that attraction, right, for people to want to fly into Orlando, to get to wherever they want to vacation, right, on the coast, and so on. But the other thing we're also seeing is growth of the region. For those of us who live here, we see it. The population has grown in Central Florida, especially during and after the pandemic. And so those people who move here want to travel as well. And so they're increasing the number of passengers that go in and out of this airport. And I think one of those factors that we use as that comparable here is prior to the pandemic, especially, and prior to, they kind of changed a little bit because of the pandemic. We were running anywhere from 17 to no more than 20% of our passenger volumes was from a point of sale of people who lived here. There are months, Sharon, that we will have close to 30% of that passenger volume from people who live here. So clearly, that's kind of driving some of the passenger growth that we're seeing here at Orlando International.
Can you tell us more about the specific growth plans for the airport, starting with, we're already talking about a new terminal, Terminal D.
Well, Terminal D is a little bit further down the line. But, as it relates to Terminal C, we, as you know, in 2022, September of 2022, we opened that up. And it was really just the first phase, right? 15 gates with 20 airplane positions. So was really just the first phase of an ultimate 60-gate kind of configuration when we get all done here. So as I'm sure many of your followers know, that during the pandemic, that first phase was scaled back a little bit. and 8 narrow body equivalent gates were deferred, taken out, stopped, basically, capped. And now we're in the process of putting them back. Construction started a little over a year ago. The contractor is way on schedule. I mean, he is right on schedule. He's not veered off his schedule to get them completed for construction by the end of December of 2025. We didn't do anything related to the landside building, which is where you check in, which is where you pick up your bags, which is where you go through the checkpoint, because those configurations were already designed with those 8 gates in mind. So when they cut back during the pandemic, that landside building was already done. It was too far gone. They couldn't really cut back any of that. So that's why we're able to add on these 8 gates shortly, in a year and a half or so, without having to do anything on the front end, the landside building. That's really kind of the immediate phase that's underway to help handle the growth. And clearly there's other things that we're looking at as well.
We're talking about adding new gates to Terminal C. And I know I've heard the concerns, I'm sure you have, about Terminal C as it is now, just in terms of it's so long and it can be harder for some of our older visitors to navigate that.
Yeah, so as part of the updates and expansion that we're adding to Terminal C, we're doing a couple other things concurrently. One is restoring back the pedestrian bridge that connects the train station to Terminal C that was taken out again during the pandemic. And built into that pedestrian bridge will be moving walkways. And then in Terminal C proper, in that landside building I was referencing, when you get through the TSA checkpoint and begin your walk up to the concourse where the hub is, we'll be putting moving walkways up there as well. And then as we get to further phases, like phase 2 of Terminal C and phase 3 of Terminal C, those future phases will have designed in it moving walkways as well. So we kind of, as we can, we go back and fill in those things that we're missing.
Do you know when the walkways might be functional?
So the moving walkways, the pedestrian bridge, its schedule is to open in October of this year. So that contract is very well along on its development. So those walkways would come in around that time. And that, by the way, would also coincide with the moving walkways that would be in that walkway that you connect from the garage, from C garage into the terminal. You would have some moving walkways put in there as well. So by the end of this calendar year, my expectation is those moving walkways, where we can fit them in, we put those in place.
When you go to the airport, you kind of have to plan for extra time to find a place for parking. Do you have anything down the line coming that might alleviate that or make it an easier process?
Yes, we're actually doing a few things. So first, immediately next to the train station, we added 3 more surface slots, actually opened them up just before the holidays, the Christmas time. They provide 850 some odd spaces that are available to anybody who has E-Pass or SunPass. Because in order for us to maximize the number of spaces, I didn't want to take away some of that valuable land to put booths and all those things you would need to do to capture people if they're doing, getting a ticket, picking up a ticket, restoring the ticket back. So everything is done electronically there, as well as in some of the other locations on site. We expanded a little bit more of the surface parking where there was opportunities. But more importantly, which is obviously what I'm finding from a lot of the people, by the way, the people who use the parking are the people who live here, right? That's that 30% I was telling you earlier. It's not the visitors because they get rental cars or they get dropped off by a taxi or transportation network provider or rideshare. It's really about the locals. And as I get to go out to the community more, I hear from the locals that they really like to park in the garage, especially the A and B garage. We tend to be creatures of habit, right? And I'm always parking in A garage, level 3, row C, spot 14. And you get there and someone's in your spot, you're kind of upset about it. Like, how dare they? So for us, it's really about how can I provide more, knowing what the preference is for the community, right? So What we've done is we've looked at the garages and say, okay, what is taking up a lot of the garage space? And it's the rental cars. On levels 1 and 2, and a portion of level 3, it's all rental cars. So we're coming up with a concept where we do a consolidated rental car facility in walking distance to C and the train station. So it's easy to get to for those people. And we already got the people mover that connects the two, right? The A, B, the C. And then all the rental cars are at one place. So you pick it up and you drop it off at one place. There's never confusion on where you drop it off. And then Sharon, the most important thing is by doing that, I free up 5,000 parking spaces in the A, B, and C garages.
One concern, certainly on the mind of customers, is just having to deal with delays when you're at the airport. Is that coming from volume? What is happening?
So part of it, clearly, like today, as we're getting a little bit of weather over here, some of it's weather driven that even the Northeast, like Buffalo, will have a lot of delays because they get a lot of snow, right? Sometimes of the year, it is what it is. We have that as well. And if you look at a lot of the statistics and data points, you'll see that a lot of the Florida major hubs, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, Orlando, and Tampa, are always on that list because of the weather, right? The lightning and so on. Clearly, we do things in a safety manner, right? So if there is demonstrated lightning in a certain distance from the airport, the ground crew will not go out there until it's cleared, right? Until they're given the all clear. So that's one of the factors. The other factor we're running into is not so much just the volume in Orlando, it's the volume in the whole state. Because you think about how aircraft come into and out of the state. And it's sort of like I-95 and I-75 coming into and out of the state. There's certain ways that you can go, and it's only those ways. In this case, it's up and down the peninsula. So if they're coming into Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, or Orlando, they're coming kind of that one way, especially if they're coming from the Northeast, which is the bulk of where the travel comes from. And so if they're coming that way, that pipe of how much planes can come through can only handle so much. And that's really about air traffic control and how they disperse it. The other thing that's a driver that really impacts us here, and it's really outside of control to a certain extent, is what happens at Cape Canaveral and the Kennedy Space Center. Because as you know, they're having launches at least once a week, sometimes more. Every time they occur, there's a window that shortens on what times the flights can go, especially if they want to head out over water to get to where they need to go. So now it forces them back up the peninsula again. The same is true, by the way, in the western part. The Panhandle, if you know your geography out there, a lot of Air Force bases over there at the Panhandle. Eglin, Herbert, all those have limitations on what commercial flights can also occur out that way, especially if they're doing testing. Again, so that it forces air traffic up and down the peninsula. And so those are the things that kind of constrain a little bit, not so much like you see for Orlando, cancellations are lower, it's delays, right? It's just really because of, I've got to stack up the aircraft into an out.
We don't talk as much about the Orlando Executive Airport. Can you just talk a bit about plans for growth there and what that will do?
Yeah, so great question, actually. So just like anything else, we've seen growth at Orlando Executive, again, a function of the growth of the area. Because as people move into this region, they're bringing their piston aircraft or their prop plane or whatever, and then looking for space to put for hangar or for storage or to touch off or take off out of Executive. And as you know, Orlando Executive is the primary reliever for Orlando International, as designated by FAA. So what its primary role is to take that small aircraft, put it there in downtown instead of bringing it here in Orlando International, so that way the commercial aircraft can continue their operations. So over time, what we've seen, Jared, is the growth in the number of operations there at Orlando Executive. I would expect within the next couple of years, we'll reach 200,000 operations. That means takeoff and landings. So that has caused the demand to making sure the facility is upgraded or updated to make, to handle that growth, as well as more hangar space.
Kevin Tebow is the CEO of the Greater Orlando Aviation Authority. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. If you miss any part of the show today, you can always subscribe to the Engage podcast and listen when it's convenient for you. This program will be available on demand at cfpublic.org, and that is where we are streaming live now.
It gives me great pleasure to introduce our representative in Washington, the Honorable Darren Soto.
Last Wednesday, students, faculty, and area dignitaries gathered at Meadowwoods Middle School.
Thank you so much, Assistant Superintendent Armbruster and Principal Nina, for having us at Meadowwoods Middle School. Let's hear it, kids. Are we excited today?
That's U.S. Representative Darren Soto, a Democrat representing Kissimmee and St. Cloud. Soto is very excited about school buses, and Meadowwoods Middle just got a whole bunch of new ones.
Here at Orange County Public Schools, the future is electrifying. We are so excited to get one of the first fleets of electric buses right here at Meadowwoods Middle School.
The transportation upgrades are a result of President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure deal signed into law in 2021. A provision allocates $5 billion over the next 5 years to replace the nation's gas-powered school buses with electric vehicles. $5 million of those dollars have been awarded in the form of a grant to Orange County schools by the Environmental Protection Agency's Clean School Bus Program. EPA Deputy Administrator Janet McCabe was in attendance at Meadowwoods.
America is kind of unique in our school bus system and our school transportation system. The yellow school bus is a very iconic American symbol. And probably most of the adults here today rode a yellow school bus to school, and it probably was pretty dirty and noisy and smelly and bounced around a lot and didn't have seat belts and all those things. But it is a part of being a child in America and going to school.
And as most of us remember, the cloying stench of diesel exhaust was also part of that experience.
We know that traditional diesel-powered school buses put tons and tons of toxic air pollution into the air, and they put it in the air in our neighborhoods, in our schoolyards. And they put it into the air right about at stroller height, where that tailpipe is coming out of the bus. And you know what's great about electric school buses? They don't have a tailpipe. There is no tailpipe. So we want to make sure that as many school districts as possible around the country have the opportunity to replace those dirty diesel buses with clean electric school buses.
But this isn't a congressional hearing or a pitch meeting with Tech VC. This is a middle school full of restless preteens, and McCabe knows that attention spans are at a premium.
Could you raise your hand if you've ever ridden in an electric vehicle, bus or a car? I have. It's super fun, isn't it? It's so quiet. It's so quiet you don't even know it's coming.
It's an easy sell to kids who are genuinely ambivalent about what's under the hood of whatever is transporting them to school, and music to the ears of those who are environmentally conscious, but too young to vote or make an economic impact as a consumer. And they certainly aren't concerned with the funding mechanisms for the program or the long-term value of making increased capital investments to mitigate both operational costs and environmental impacts.
When you spend money on your gasoline-powered school bus, that's an expense.
That's Jim Fenton, director of the Florida Solar Energy Center at UCF.
I'm trying to convince you that using the school bus with batteries and backup power, now it's an investment. You actually make money doing this stuff, because now I don't have to buy backup generators. I don't have to do this. I don't have to do that.
He breaks it down so even a middle schooler can understand.
My analogy was way back when, when an incandescent light bulb was 50 cents and a loaf of bread was $1.50, and you only had $2 in your wallet and you had to feed your family, you weren't going to go buy a $4 compact fluorescent light bulb because it cost too much money up front. Now, it paid itself back and was better, and it was a good investment, and you should have done all those things. But that's the problem that we have, is that people look at the upfront costs.
Replacing the Orange County school bus fleet with all electric vehicles will be a daunting task. This current grant of $5 million will allow Orange County to purchase 20 buses. The district currently operates more than 700 diesel-powered buses. After the speeches and presentations, the students were allowed to explore the electric buses. And while a handful of electric school buses may not reverse climate change, it will at least inspire a handful of students at Meadowwoods Middle School to change the future. Coming up, Monday is Solar Eclipse Day. We'll find out the best way to see it without melting those retinas out. I'm Sharon Stone. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. New name, same mission. And just a reminder, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you'd like to hear more about or what you're glad you heard, what else you want to talk about. You can email us at engage@cfpublic.org, or you can send us a talkback on the free Central Florida Public Media app. You'll just go to the menu, select, send us a talkback, record your question, your feedback, hit send, and we will get it. Don't forget there's always good old voicemail. Give us a call at 407-273-2300. The extension is 246. Leave us one there. We'll be right back. You are listening to Engage on Central Florida Public Media. I'm Sharon Stone. Monday is Eclipse Day. The moon will transit the sun in the early afternoon, and for a few minutes, darkness will consume a narrow strip of land extending from the southern border in Texas, arcing north, skimming the Great Lakes, and passing from Maine into Canada. The impact won't be as dramatic here in Central Florida, but it will be noticeable. Our understanding of eclipses only came into focus in recent centuries. For the first several 100,000 years humanity wandered the planet, there was really no clue about why the sun disappeared every few years. Every culture from every corner of the earth had theories, many of them colorful reflections of their own spirituality. Now, Derek Demeter is the planetarium manager at the Emil Buehler Perpetual Trust Planetarium at Seminole State College. He joined Engage to share some nuggets of eclipse lore. And I started the conversation by asking Demeter to imagine how the earliest mammals, cave dwellers, and prehistoric humans might have interpreted an event like an eclipse.
Just imagine going about your day, and then all of a sudden it starts to get a little darker, and then all of a sudden just this rapid darkness. Almost looks like the sun is setting. Animals are going just, wild. They're behaving like if they were going to sleep. Or our animals that are nocturnal are coming out, and you don't know what's going on, and you look up in the sky and you see this black sun, if you will, and it's just probably terrifying, and hoping that the sun would return, and you don't know what's going to happen, and all of a sudden out of nowhere the sun comes back and everything is fine again, and you're like, whoa, that's definitely something I don't want to happen again. And for thousands and thousands of years, people have been kind of obsessed with observing and trying to predict eclipses, so that way they have a better grasp of that uneasy feeling of something like that happening again.
So, Derek, when were people actually first able to predict these events?
So there's a couple of situations where we find in places like ancient China, we find turtle shells and other bones. They're called oracle bones that actually talk about these eclipses. There are places in the Middle East where they're documenting in cuneiforms, talking about, predicting an eclipse. There are writings in ancient Greece talking about an epic battle that occurred between two factions that essentially there was a truce that occurred because of an eclipse. So I think, for thousands of years, people have been documenting, these events.
Was it more of a cultural or religious interpretation before the science of it was known?
Yes, definitely. The earliest kind of views of the eclipse, again, going back to ancient China, it was very important. They believed that the heavenly bodies in the sky kind of told the story and told the predictions of the rulers of like the emperor, for example, and they connected that with that. So astronomers and astrologers were actually one and the same thing back in the ancient world. So they were predicting things that were to happen, and if they didn't get it right, there are talks about astronomers being executed for failing to predict that eclipse and things like that, and in places like the Middle East. There is a connection to the religion of Islam and the idea of eclipses. There are paintings and tapestries and things in the Middle Ages of these things called eclipse dragons that were believed to be the ones to bring forth these eclipses. And the Vedic or Indian religions, they believe that there are 2 points, two shadow planets, Rahu and Ketu, that essentially brought forth eclipses. So there was definitely a connection to the more supernatural, the more religious aspect of it. And then later on, we start to see the rise of trying to understand this kind of thing scientifically.
Is there still more to understand now scientifically, or do we pretty much have it figured out?
Yeah, so eclipses are fairly common. They happen usually about every 18 months. And the reason why solar eclipses are special is because of the fact that the path of totality, the shadow that creeps across the Earth's surface, only covers a very small couple hundred miles because of the moon's size. And so even though they happen fairly regularly, and they're actually pretty easy to model these days because we have a pretty good idea of the orbits of the sun, Earth, and moon, it still is exciting because only a very limited number of people on planet Earth will actually get to see an eclipse, a total eclipse. We pretty much have a pretty good understanding of how eclipses occur. The one thing that is very interesting about solar eclipses is that it's actually the only time when you have totality when you can see the sun's corona, which is the outer atmosphere of the sun. So there are some interesting studies that can be done here on Earth on the corona. There's a lot of aspects about the sun's corona that we really don't understand. And while we have space telescopes up in space that can study that stuff, it is also very exciting to be able to watch these events and study the corona from Earth's surface. So, but as far as the mechanics of eclipses, it's pretty well known at this point.
What will Central Floridians be able to see at peak eclipse?
Yeah, so at peak eclipse, we're here in Central Florida. It's going to range between 58 to 60% of the eclipse, depending upon where you are. If you're more towards like the West Coast, you'll see a little bit more, not that much more than what you would if you were on the East Coast of Florida. But the average is about 58 to 59%. And what you're going to see is, I've been kind of describing it as a crescent sun, or a croissant sun if you're somebody who enjoys eating croissants. But basically, it's going to be a half sun. It looks like somebody just took a massive bite out of the sun, and you're going to see kind of this beautiful crescent shape. Still really, really cool to see, especially if you have a way to view it either through eclipse glasses, or you can even use something as simple as a colander. You can actually point the colander towards the sun and look down at the ground. Actually see little shadows casted of the sun. You actually see those little crescents on the ground or wherever you're viewing it. So that's basically what most people are going to see here in Central Florida.
And what's the best time to step outside?
So basically, roughly maybe 10 minutes prior to 3 o'clock, you want to get outside. If you obviously, it starts around 2 o'clock. The actual first contact of the eclipse will be around 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. And then really the maximum extent of the eclipse will happen around 3 o'clock. So if you wanted to just go out and take a quick peek at that, you want to be out, roughly around, 2:50 or around that time, peek out. But of course, if you want to watch the whole thing, you want to start sometime around 2 o'clock or so. One thing that I'm encouraging people is on August 12th, 2045, there is going to be a total solar eclipse over Central Florida. And the eclipse is actually going to be one of the longest in the last several hundred years at 6 minutes and 30 seconds. And the center line of the eclipse will be going right over the Disney theme parks and that part of Central Florida. But pretty much anyone who is here in Central Florida, all the way up into places like Daytona, you will be in the path of totality in 2045.
Okay, we'll have to have you back on Engage then.
Oh, I will. I'm already starting to plan for that event. It's going to be a eclipse of the century for me, anyways.
Derek Demeter is the planetarium manager at Seminole State College. And don't forget, if you're going to step outside, wear proper eye protection. I want to mention the team involved in Central Florida Public Media's weekly radio show and podcast that explores human space exploration. Are We There Yet? That's producer Marion Summerall and host Brendan Byrne. They're going to be at the Orlando Science Center on Monday for an eclipse viewing party happening there. That is all for today's edition of Engage. We will be back on Tuesday afternoon at 3 o'clock. You can learn more about today's program by visiting our website, cfpublic.org. I'm Sharon Stone. Thank you for joining us. All Things Considered is coming up following NPR News.